Welcome to the virtual training for the Title I Comprehensive Needs Assessment on digging into problems of practice to identify comprehensive needs within high-impact systems drivers. This is a little different than the way we have traditionally considered comprehensive needs using a programmatic approach to school improvement. A problem-based approach is a more equitable approach, and we know that problems in education are complex. Digging into problems of practice will enable schools to examine the multifacetedness of problems impacting student success and caring culture and identify high-impact systems drivers for continuous improvement. As we engage in this process, it's important to avoid solutionitis. As educators, it is our natural propensity to want to propose solutions once a problem has been identified. In this process, we will want to stay in root cause analysis thinking to study the problem, identify high-impact areas called drivers for improvement, and then shift to identifying SIP actions as solutions. This will help us to hone our actions to those high-impact areas for attaining SIP goals. This process is best performed with multiple stakeholders, providing their perspectives on the factors impacting the problem of practice. We realized during the COVID-19 pandemic this may be difficult. If multiple stakeholders, that is more than one staff member, are able to engage in this process, we ask you to celebrate and build on ideas and seek to understand practitioner knowledge about the factors impacting the problem of practice. We encourage you to embrace possibly wrong and definitely incomplete. Don't let perfection get in the way of refining your SIP actions. In this process, you may add and amend your current SIP actions. In the previous video called Identifying Problems of Practice, you identified two problems, one for student success and one for caring culture. For each problem of practice, you may perform 3 optional protocols that will help you to identify those key systems drivers and look at the interrelationships between them to be able to prioritize them. The 3 protocols are affinity mapping, which helps us to identify factors impacting the problem of practice. Next, you will create a fishbone diagram to visualize the multifacetedness of the problem and identify those key systems drivers or the categories. And then lastly, we'll perform interrelational diagrams protocol to examine the relationships between the drivers and identify high-impact categories for continuous improvement and SIP action planning. To begin the process, we will engage in a protocol called affinity mapping. This protocol allows learners to process individually and with a group all of the factors or root causes impacting the problem of practice. Before you begin, and on the next slide, you will want to have each member of your team place their name at the top of the column. This provides a space or a lane for individual processing. Some teams modify this step by using a jot thought structure, jotting one factor or root cause impacting the problem on each sticky. As you list the factors, consider shifting your perspectives from the role you currently serve in to a student or a family member or a classroom teacher. Ask yourself, if I were a student, what would I say are the factors impacting the problem of practice? It is also important to consider factors impacting the problem so that we can see it from multiple perspectives. This will help us to illuminate the complexities or multifacetedness of the problem. Scribe the name of each team member at the top of the column. Feel free to add more columns if you have more than 4 team members. Each team member will scribe factors or root causes impacting the problem of practice. And remember to avoid solutionitis. We want to stay in root cause thinking here. Allow sufficient time for each individual to process. Once team members have finished individually processing, as a team, review the team members' columns and organize the common themes into what we call natural categories. Ask yourself which ideas go together and name each category. These categories are the drivers. You will need to make 4 to 6 categories. This may require you to consolidate or tease out some categories. We advise you not to go fewer than 4 and try not to extend greater than 6 categories. Type your 4 to 6 category names in this table. These are the drivers, or large bucket areas that are impacting the problem and are the potential areas for continuous and iterative improvement. Next, we will prioritize these drivers by analyzing the relationships between them. If you use the jot thought structure, team members would share their individual stickies, and collectively your team would form 4 to 6 groupings, with a different colored sticky labeling the category name for the groupings. If time emerges as a driver, you will want to specify the type of time, like planning time, reflection time, or collaboration time. Ron Rickert of Creating Cultures of Thinking, written in 2015, writes about how time is an indication of value or prioritization. We cannot add another hour to the day. So if you have time as a driver, make sure you specify the type of time. To see the multifacetedness impacting the problem, it's recommended that you construct a fishbone diagram. This helps visualize the complexities of the problem of practice. This will also help to support the next step, prioritizing the drivers by examining the relationships using a protocol called interrelational diagrams. Place the problem statement for student success at the head of the fish in the yellow box. Next, place the drivers, those category names, at the end of each of the bones. Finally, you will want to scribe some of the factors or root causes for each driver along the bone. This will help to see the systems creating the current outcomes. It may also illuminate blind spots in your systems and differentiate external versus internal factors. The interrelational diagram is a protocol that analyzes the relationships between the drivers and prioritizes which ones are high impact and which ones are low impact. When considering where to spend your Title I budget or what type of staffing, professional development, or material needs your school might have, it's important to make sure that the school's resources are being utilized in high-impact drivers. You will begin this process by placing your drivers in a circle. Here you can see the drivers that Keisha Jackson-Meir, principal of Braddock Elementary School, identified for the student success problem or practice that she had, which was the consistency of the implementation of the workshop model, which impacts reading and math instruction. Once you have placed the primary drivers in a circle, you'll want to discuss the relationships between the drivers. You'll want to ask, is there a relationship between two drivers, and determine which category impacts the other more. Draw an arrow between the drivers, with the head of the arrow pointing toward the driver that is impacted more. Once you have established all of the relationships, you will count the number of outgoing arrows. The categories with the most arrows outgoing are the highest impact drivers. Here are a few other things to consider. If there is no relationship, then no line should be drawn. There may not be lines going in two different directions. And if there is a tentative relationship, you may choose to draw a dotted line. Let me show you some examples. Here you see the drivers identified by Braddock Elementary School for their student success problem or practice around implementation or consistent implementation of the workshop model. So in the interrelational diagram protocol then, you will need to weigh how each driver impacts all of the other drivers. Again, if there is a relationship, you will draw a line. So for example, we can see that there's a relationship between understanding learner needs and classroom management. You will also see that it was determined that understanding needs impacts classroom management more. Therefore, the head of the arrow is pointing into classroom management. Make sure that for each driver, you weigh its relationship to each of the other drivers. If a relationship has already been established, you do not need to draw another line, just move on. You'll see that in the beginning of this protocol, the dialogue in prioritizing which impacts the other more will be a bit robust and maybe feel a little clunky, but as the protocol continues, the protocol actually speeds up because many of the relationships have already been established. The other pieces, I would advise to refrain from language that says, if we just did better at this, then that will get better. That's solutionitis thinking. You may need to refer back to your fishbone diagram to clarify what were the factors that we identified when we talked about, for example, understanding learner needs. How do those factors impact the factors of classroom management more? This will help you to prioritize where to place the heads of your arrows. Feel free to use this template if it will help you to perform the interrelational diagram protocol. You will copy and paste the various different category names or drivers that you identified during the affinity mapping and fishbone protocols, place them in a circle here. Then you will begin to weigh each driver and how it impacts the others. First asking, is there a relationship? And then which one is impacting the other more to know where to place the head of the arrow. Once you're done drawing all of the arrows, you will count the number of outgoing drivers. This will help you to identify those high impact to low impact drivers. Before beginning this protocol, we actually recommend that you make a prediction, perhaps by placing a dot or marking in some way the driver you think will be the highest impact. You may find and be surprised that often the driver we think is the highest impact, because we are able to control the factors around it, is actually the lowest impact driver. That is one of the ahas that arises from doing this particular protocol. Don't forget that you need to perform the root cause analysis, that is the affinity mapping and fishbone diagrams, both for student success and for caring culture. Here is the template for the interrelational diagram protocol for caring culture. W. Edwards Deming said, "Every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets." Edward Deming is encouraging us to consider the various different actions that we are taking that align to the problem of practice, and consider adjusting or amending them. These would be the SIP actions that you have in your current SIP. To locate your current SIP, you'll need to connect to your regional Google site. Once you connect to your regional Google site, you will want to find your school SIP folder and locate your current SIP. Once you review your current SIP, you're going to want to cut and paste them into the So What section of the Comprehensive Needs Assessment. Don't forget to cut and paste all of the goals for student success in this section, or caring culture in the caring culture section. You will also need to cut and paste the SIP strategies and actions, and then consider how do these align back to those high impact drivers that you identified. You may need to adjust or amend your SIP actions here. Lastly, you will code each of these SIP actions by the Title I components. Please note that the Title I components are listed at the bottom of the page for your ease in coding them. So for example, here you can see some SIP actions that are coded by the Title I components. When coding your current SIP actions and aligning them to those key systems drivers, you may find that you need to amend or add an action. This is okay because the Comprehensive Needs Assessment process will suffice for the ESSA requirements for 2 years as long as your school meets those state accreditation guidelines. If you notice that a particular action actually could fall under 2 different components, please feel free to list them component 2 and 3 or 2 and 4, whatever the combination might be. Then you will want to review and reflect, do you have actions that touch upon all 3 of the components 2, 3, and 4? Again, you might need to add or amend a SIP action. Once you have completed the Comprehensive Needs Assessment, you will need to upload it to the SIP folder in your regional school's Google site. The Title I team will work with the regional leadership to link your Comprehensive Needs Assessment to your current and future SIPs. The completed Comprehensive Needs Assessment should be posted to your school's SIP folder in your regional Google site by April 13, 2020. Please note that this is the same date as your Title I budget book. If you would like additional support with this process, please contact Yvonne Denome, Lisa Felder, Gina Toller, or Claire Silva. Thank you.